Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, my friends. We've got a good one this week. You know, politics is heating up for 2022, and it is a doozy. It is a doozy. Well, a GOP Congress member supporting the Democrat January 6th insurrection narrative is getting primaried. Retired Army Colonel Conrad Reynolds is challenging the GOP insurrection truther named French Hill in Arkansas's Second Congressional District. Hill is veered in the wrong direction, Reynolds says, for the people of the Second District. For example, he sided with the Democrats in dismissing Trump's questioning of the 2020 election results. He voted with the Democrats on the establishment of the partisan January 6th committee, which has turned out to be nothing more than a tool for attacking Trump and his supporters. He's also voted with Speaker Pelosi and Democrats to establish a compulsory national database for tracking vaccine status. And by contrast, Colonel Reynolds supports election integrity, believes the truth about the 2020 election should be exposed, and feels that each American should make his or her own decisions in health matters. Conrad, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Man, what a pleasure. This has been great. It's my first time.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
Folks, we go back a little ways here because Colonel Reynolds actually mentored me when I first started running for office because he was running for the U.S. Senate in Arkansas at the same time I was running for the U.S. Senate in Louisiana, and we got linked up. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Conrad. All right, why the heck are you doing it? That's got to be my first question.
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but we in the military understand there's a time to stand up, and this is one of those times. Mr. Hill has consistently, of course, he's my congressman right now, right? But he has consistently turned his back on the people of Arkansas, and just like you mentioned in your monologue there's several things that he's voted for that I have a real problem with. I got a problem with the fact that he supported the January 6th commission. Now, he didn't vote for the committee, but he voted for the commission. 35 Republicans did, and he was one of them, which gave Nancy Pelosi, a lot of ammunition to do the committee that she's got right now to establish it. And so I have a real problem with that. And he turns back on us again for the National Vaccine Database. Now, they don't say it's a tracking database, but if you read it, I've read the bill, it's pretty clear to me that's what it is. So these are kind of things that we just cannot tolerate. And so I decided I would run, and it turns out there's a whole lot of people in Arkansas that feel just like I do. So I think we're going to have a really good shot at taking Mr. Hill out a week from tomorrow.
Well, okay, so you haven't lost your mind then, of course.
No, I haven't lost my mind.
And I see behind you, you've been endorsed by General Michael Flynn.
Right.
At the end of the show, I'll make a quick announcement, but so let's dive right into it. Let's start with national security policy. Where are you at in contrast to Hill on things like Ukraine?
Well, I think that we need to help Ukraine. We should have helped Ukraine a long time ago. I think we could all agree that if President Trump had been in office, this probably would not have happened. Of course, you can't prove a negative. I mean, you don't know, but I suspect that that's what would have happened. But now that we've got the reality that we're facing, I don't think that sending $40 billion is the answer. I mean, you and I both been in overseas assignments. I've been in Afghanistan 4.5 years, Iraq for a year, and I will tell you, probably 30 to 40% of that money is going to find its way to some offshore bank account for those who are in charge. I mean, I'm talking about the Ukrainians. You know that. It's going to be wasted. Yeah. I don't think that it's a corrupt country. It's been corrupt for a long, long time. We've known that. That's why the Europeans didn't want it in NATO. And I think that we need to really look at that before we start sending $40 billion. Rob, one of the things that really irritate me more than anything, I don't mean to pivot on you, but I just want to let you know, we couldn't get $20 billion for the wall here in Arkansas, in America. We couldn't get $20 billion. We had an opportunity in 17 and 18. It was the rhinos in Congress that decided they were not going to support President Trump, and every illegal that crosses our own southern border, which from national security's perspective, we've got to secure that. Every illegal that crosses is a direct result of the inaction of the Republicans, the rhinos, That's why I'm a rhino remover. I have on this pen right here, and
I like it.
That's what we want to do.
Well, you're not going to find any disagreement from me, as you know. We've got to remove not just rhinos, but the uniparty leadership that keeps going along with the Democrats. And this $40 billion wouldn't even be an issue had the Republicans put up enough of a fight. But quite honestly, from a constitutional perspective, and you and I both taken an oath for 3 decades or more, both of us, it's important to defend the Constitution of the United States. And when I see the Democrat leader on the floor of the House say, we are at war, when I know a vote has not taken place, and it probably wouldn't pass.
No, it wouldn't. I guarantee it wouldn't. And so you and I both understand what's going on here. But the bottom line is we've got to stand up and make our voices known. And the people in Arkansas, in the Second District, have not been well represented. And so that is why. Mr. Hill is a go along, get along kind of guy with the people in Congress. That's just the way it is. And we've got to have people that will stand up. For example, the vaccine mandate. Where were our congressmen and women who are now saying they're all against it, but they weren't standing up? And on the steps of the Capitol, they weren't defunding DHS. They weren't doing the things they could have done. And I think, I believe that we need more people who are willing to step up and say, you know what, I'm willing to take a bullet if I have to, because guess what? We're not going to allow that. It's unconstitutional. Whether it's not fixing our southern border, whether it's because that is the responsibility of the federal government to secure that border. That's not Texas, not Arizona. It was the federal government supposed to do that. And you and I both know we can do that in 24 hours. That's a big deal even here in Arkansas. Again, we're all border states. So I have a real problem with that. I have a problem with the people that are crossing from all these other countries. We have no idea who they are, and they're being bussed and shipped throughout the interior of our country without anybody knowing anything about where they're going or who is supporting them. And I think that's a real problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah, and at the same time all this is happening, our military is not able to recruit the numbers that it needs, and people are bailing out. I just talked to a gentleman just a few hours ago, called me, retired from the U.S. Air Force just this last April, so not very long ago, and he was in the recruiting command, and he said, we're not meeting our numbers. We can't meet our numbers because people don't want to come in because of the craziness from the COVID vaccine mandate, and especially the men's age group, that's where the heart conditions and those kind of things really do pop up. And this person told me that he said, hey, I worked at public affairs is where he worked, and he was told he had to write certain things that talked about the vaccine and how safe it was when everybody knows that it's not that safe.
Well, let me say this about that. The military is not the same military you and I served in. It's just not. They've gone woke. It's not just the military, Rob. It's all of the national security agencies. It's the military. Ever since Obama got in, he started putting people in place in some of these positions that they don't think like we do. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And what we've seen is they've been promoted into positions of leadership, which right now is causing real problems for everybody else, because they're not going to be promoting people if you're not woke enough, if you're not with the program. We have SESs that are having in their name block, their signature block, the preferred pronouns. If they're making the military and all the federal agencies these indoctrination centers, and if you're not with the program, then they don't want you. And that's why we have an FBI that's, in my mind, has gone rogue in a lot of ways. It's not the people that are working that you and I used to work with. It's the people in the upper leadership levels, and they're forcing this down, and they don't feel they have an option. They have to continue to work, so they just keep their mouth shut. But that's not a country that we should have, and we need somebody in Congress that will speak up against that. We should not allow that at all. And that's one of the things I will do when I go to Congress. I will be part of the HIPSI. That's one. Why is it that the congressmen in the HIPSI, the House Intelligence Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, why is it that they don't have to take a polygraph? That's what I don't understand. It's good for everybody else, but they don't have to take one. Okay, that's why we've got the Swalwells of the world in there who has been sleeping with a Chinese spy. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think that if we have some leadership, people are just praying for there to be some type of leadership, people who will stand up. And I intend to do that.
Well, you mentioned the intelligence community. Yeah, you were in the intelligence business in the Army, so that's a natural fit for you. But what about China and the House Armed Services Committee? China and Taiwan is a much bigger threat than Russia is from a hegemonic perspective. Now, Russia's got almost 6,000 nuclear weapons that still are operable and reliable, but from an economic and business and national security perspective, the Chinese really have become a peer to the United States, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
In everything but nuclear weapons, and they're quickly building.
Absolutely. And we're very dependent upon China for products and services, things that that we buy and sell in this country. I mean, we're really dependent. But that has happened over, a couple of decades. And it's because the people in Congress who've allowed, again, I'm all for Trump trying to change some of that, because I think that was very, very important. But we need to be building more things in our country. We need to make it more advantageous. We should not allow people to go and take corporations overseas, make a lot of money and bring it back, okay, and make their profit with no U.S. labor involved at all. And I think that's been a problem, and I think that we need to relook that. I think President Trump was on the right track, and he was trying to get some things accomplished. But you know what? We're facing a lot of corporations with very deep pockets, with a lot of money, and it's very difficult to overcome a lot of those, particularly the special interest groups that are working day and night, 24/7, 365 days a year in D.C. One of the things that I'm really pushing, I know it's going to be hard to do, but we've got to get term limits. We've got to get term limits in Congress. We've got to have a balanced budget. These are things that we can do, but the people have got to stand up and say, yes, we want that. And they got to back up the legislators that they vote in. They got to back them up when they say, okay, I'm going to vote for this. I'm going to stand up for it. And so we've got to get that word out. It can be done, but right now, with people not standing up, the congressmen and congresswomen do you remember the balanced budget amendment that they did in 2018? It was in April of 2018. The Republicans, we had the House, we had the Senate, and we had a President Trump. And they went in and said, okay, we're going to do a balanced budget amendment. They all knew it wasn't going to pass. It was all pretend. Jim Jordan called them out on the House floor. And he said, if you really wanted to have guts, you should have done it 3 weeks ago when we voted for the $1.3 trillion omnibus bill with all the pork. That's when was the time for courage. Okay, but no, we passed that with less than 1 hour debate. We only had 15 hours to look over a 2,300-page bill. Now today, he's talking April 13th of 2018. He says, today, you're asking us to debate 4 hours on a 5-page bill. Are you kidding me? Well, we all know it's not going to pass. That is the type of dishonesty. That's the type of pretend, kabuki dance, whatever you want to call it in D.C., that they do in order to make the people back home vote for them. Because just like my opponent, French Hill, he brought that up. I brought that up. I wanted a balanced budget. He never, ever wanted a balanced budget amendment. He knew it wasn't going to pass. But they said it's CYA. Well, you know what everybody knows what that means. And that's what he's using now, saying that, hey, I brought that up. Don't worry the fact that I voted for just about every debt increase. Don't worry about that. When I got in office in 2014, our debt was $16 trillion. Now it's $30 trillion. Don't look at any of that. Look at the fact that I tried to do this balanced budget amendment back in 2018. That's what's going on, and I think that people, my sense is they're awake. They see what's going on, and that's why I'm going to win this election a week from tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I mean, the not just the Congress, but the executive branch and the unelected bureaucrats are putting us all in danger. I mean, I mean, from a national security perspective, the problems are so vast
Yes.
that it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take some really good appointees on whoever the next
Sure.
president's part is to go in and do a scorched earth policy to get rid of some of this leadership that
Right.
The Obama administration hired in. And I believe you're exactly right. I've talked to a lot of retired civil servants that left during that time frame that told me exactly that's what was happening. And now those individuals are in SCS leadership positions and those kind of things, as you mentioned. Senior executive service is the equivalent of a civilian general officer or
Right.
flag officer, folks.
The
So,
flag officer of the civilian workforce.
yeah,
And,
exactly right.
and we've got a lot of them that are going to have to be weeded out,
Yeah.
and it's going to take time, but we're going to be able to do it. But you got to get people in there. Look, I know you know what the Freedom Caucus is. Maybe some of your viewers don't. The Freedom Caucus is the most conservative group of legislators in the House, started by Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows in 2015. I will be the first congressman from Arkansas in the Freedom Caucus because it's important, because the Freedom Caucus, they got some great bills that they've tried to put out, but I look at them as the anchor that keeps the Republican ship from drifting too far left. You know, they
Yeah.
try to keep it to the right, and they try to pass bills that will really help. But unfortunately, too many of the rhinos in Congress don't want to support them. And instead of 40 people in the Freedom Caucus, we need 140.
Yeah.
And I would say, if somebody says they're not going to be in the Freedom Caucus, don't vote for them. Vote for somebody who's going to be in the Freedom Caucus, because that's how we're really going to make change in the Republican Party.
Oh, it absolutely is. And you mentioned the economy and everything, and I'm still stuck on the border and everything, and the economy is being impacted by that. For 2 years in a row now, a year ago, numbers came out that 100,000 Americans had died of fentanyl overdoses.
Right.
And just a few days ago, 107,000 this year. Those numbers are astronomical.
Unforgivable. It's unforgivable. And
Yeah.
all of this could have been fixed in 2017 and 18. And this is what I tell people on the campaign trail, because we got to look out 2 to 3 to 4 years from now. We have an opportunity. We have one small window of opportunity in 2025 and 26. We're going to have a Republican Congress. We're going to have a Republican president. I guarantee it. And that may be Trump. It may be DeSantis. I don't know. But we are going to have that. The question is, are we going to spoil our opportunity, just like we did in 17, 18, but having the wrong people in Congress? I think that we have an opportunity this year and then in 2024 to elect enough congressmen and women in the House and the Senate that will be able to make a difference when that new Republican president comes in. Because if we don't, we're going to have real problems. I don't see another opportunity for a long, long time.
Well, a lot of what happens in the House is up to the Speaker of the House, though.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but if I were going to go into Congress in 2022 as a Republican, I wouldn't be voting for the continued weak leadership that's been demonstrated the past 20 years. And Kevin McCarthy's one of those people.
I couldn't agree with you more, but here I will say this. My first vote, the first guy I want to vote for is Trump. I wish Trump would run for Speaker of the House. I really would. But you don't have to be a member to be the Speaker.
I'm aware of that, but I have my doubts that that's a possibility.
No, but it would be great, wouldn't it? But he would be my first. I would like to look at somebody like Jim Jordan, Andy Biggs, somebody like that could come in, maybe even Scott Perry. But I would like for somebody to come in that really and truly represents the conservative portion of the Republican Party. That's what I want to see. We'll see how things pan out as the months go on. But that's what I'll be looking at when I get there.
Well, that's good, because we've got to stop this budgeting by continuing resolution. I ask every candidate, okay, they're going to hit you with a continuing resolution, say you got to do it, but it's going to fund Planned Parenthood. Now, I know every candidate that I interview is pro-life, 100%.
Right.
So what are you going to do when you get hit with that?
Well, that's a $64,000 question. I'll vote no. We need to learn to vote no on those things. Okay, this is why term limits are so important, because now the seniority thing has taken a life of its own over the decades. And what's happened is that freshmen have virtually no power to do anything, and so they can force you into these modes to make these decisions, and then you're locked in once you make one of those votes. Personally, I don't mind voting no. I don't mind being a 2-year congressman. I'm not going there for a career. I mean, that's me. I'm going there to try to change minds, get people behind me on the conservative side, try to get some folks to grow a backbone. You know, there's a fish we have here in Arkansas called the duckbill. I don't know if you've heard of that. It has no backbone. You know, people don't need to be that way. We got to have backbone. And there's a whole freshman class that's coming in, a lot of military guys that I think are going to be able to step up to the plate and make a huge difference. And I hope to be one of those.
So I take it from that comment, you believe that the House majority is going to switch to Republicans in 2022.
Oh yeah, there's no question in my mind. No question in my mind. I don't have a crystal ball, but let me tell you. But with the way things are going right now, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's the as they say, it's the Republicans to lose. It certainly is.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's ours to lose.
Yeah, and that gets me to my next question, Conrad, and that is, man, it cost me $150 to fill up the tank on my pickup truck of diesel just the other day. And my wife's complaining that it's now costing her $60 instead of $40 to fill up her car. Energy policy. What are the first things that you as a Republican and a leader, even in the freshman class, are going to be pushing from an energy policy perspective?
Well, it really didn't take a huge jump of imagination. It's already been done. President Trump already did it. We already know what needs to be done. The template is already there to be energy independent. And we must go back to that. I intend to do that, to reinvigorate everything that President Trump was doing. And we need to turn back everything that President Biden has been doing. And I guarantee you our energy situation will turn around immediately. But we can't do it if we continue to cut off the XL pipeline, restrict ourselves in every other way, and hope that we can be energy independent. We've been there. We've done it. We did it under President Trump. This is not rocket science. We can do it again.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like you mentioned about producing things here at home. I mean, look at the predicament we find ourselves in and our allies find themselves in, and they have to be constrained to the point where I believe that's what led to the failure of deterrence against Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, is that, the Russians knew that the Europeans were over a barrel, literally, a barrel of gas,
sure,
natural gas and oil,
right,
and it was their barrel. And they knew that it would split the alliance, which it did, and is still doing it as much as they try to cover for that. Germany continues to be, I'd call it recalcitrant in its support of the effort and those kind of things. So we've got to produce our own energy at home. And as Mr. Trump was doing, I ran on this in 2014, and that is get our liquefied natural gas exporting up to speed as quickly as possible and get into that market. With LNG. I mean, we're the only exporters really of LNG in massive quantities that there are.
You're exactly right. And here in Arkansas, we call it the Fayetteville Shale Play, where huge amounts of natural gas was discovered via fracking. And you're right. We have a tremendous amount of natural gas in this country. We still got a tremendous amount of coal. I think we need to really look nuclear. Personally, I think we need to. We've had one nuclear plant here in Arkansas for 40 or 50 years. It produces about 25% of our electricity, and it's been safely run for decades. I think we need to look at that as well. But we have to be energy independent. And as far as being a global economy, there are some things that are global, no problem. But when you have to depend on Taiwan for all your chips, from virtually all your chips that you use to run your electronics, that's a problem. And what's happened is that companies have found that it's cheaper, it's easier to go over and exploit the low labor cost in these other countries and ship the product back. But we cannot continue to do that. We have to look at ways to keep a lot of the expertise, particularly our medicines, medicines too. I mean, we're importing all of those things. So I think we're going to have to really look at it. The Congress is going to have to actually do its job instead of sitting there and passing on bills, these multi-trillion-dollar omnibus bills when they can't even read it. All of that stuff drives me nuts. In the military, you and I both know that if we did things like that, we'd be fired in a heartbeat. We'd be relieved command immediately. And this idea that, well, you got to keep these Congress people in there because they're experienced. Well, how many commanders did you go through? After 3 years, right? I think it was Charles de Gaulle, I think, that said that the cemetery is full of indispensable people, right? I mean, no one's indispensable. So we have a lot of good leaders that could come up and do their thing in Congress and then go back home and play a role back in their states. But I think that we really do need a change of blood in Congress, and it needs to be a rotational thing. We need to keep people coming in. And so I'm excited. We're excited in my campaign. We think we're going to do real well, and we're going to win this. And Fred Schill, I think, is going to be one of the first of the 35 Republicans that voted for the January 6th commission. I think he's going to be the first one to get beat. So we'll know a week from tomorrow.
Well, he certainly deserves to get beat because the insurrection false narrative that he supports is doing nothing but harming the American people, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. It generates division, mistrust, and it's not true. And the power of the government's being used to suppress really political opposition on one side. And it's not just the executive branch, the judicial branch, all of them are being used to suppress that opposition. And it's almost like I live in the 1965 Soviet Union.
It is very similar from what I understand. I will tell you, there's a lot of things he said. He came out against Trump early on and said that the 2020 election was not stolen. That was fiction and folly. His words, not mine. That was his quote. He said that Trump's rhetoric led to the hot rhetoric, led to the January 6th riots. Well, I think he's wrong. I heard the speech. He didn't either. And here's my question as just a intel guy. Who briefed the president? We know now that there were people federal agents infused in that crowd. We know that.
Yeah.
That's a fact. The question is, who briefed the president on this potential threat before he ever did his speech? Who briefed him? I don't think anybody. And I think that's a real failure. And was that intentional or what? But no one's asked that question. And I would like to know the answer to that. And that's one of the things that I'll be asking when I get into D.C.
Well, that's good. We know he was briefed something at some point because he told Pelosi and company and Esper, one of the biggest disappointments of my lifetime, Mark Esper, that they were going to need 10,000 guard troops to make sure that it was safe. The Capitol was safe on January 6th. So he had to be briefed something, but I guarantee you he wasn't briefed like he should have been on the undercover people and informants and paid human sources that were in that crowd. And when you look at what the outcome of the Whitmer case trial was, and you see how two of those guys were acquitted and two were hung juries based on the defense of FBI entrapment, and you see that the same guy that ran that office, that ran that operation, was moved to Washington, D.C. in December before January of 2021, it makes you go, And I'm hoping that people like you will ask those questions and not just throw that January 6th committee aside, but make it a real committee and investigate and release the communications between Pelosi, the U.S. Capitol Police, the Metro Police, the FBI, release it all. There's no reason for any of that stuff to be classified. And I hope that one of you guys and gals, or maybe all of you, can get together and pass a bill that makes Congress susceptible to the FOIA law. Because the U.S. Capitol Police are hiding behind it. So are the Metro Police, and so is Nancy Pelosi, and so is Mitch McConnell. Because they're all responsible for security in the Capitol, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But it all falls under Nancy Pelosi. Really, I mean, that's her bailiwick. She shows, and we're going to find out those answers. It's going to take time, and but hopefully we get to it sooner than later. They've delayed. This whole committee thing is just a witch hunt, as we both know, and it's just stall. And you already hear some people saying, "Hey, it's just move on, just move on." No, I don't want to move on. The people that I talk to in my district say, why is it that nobody is ever held accountable for wrongdoing in D.C.? That's why I don't want to vote. That's why I don't want to participate, because it looks like it is a rigged system. So we have a responsibility and an obligation to find out who made those decisions and are they criminally culpable. If they are, well, then we need to prosecute. I believe that. And so hopefully we'll make that happen when I'm there. That's one of the things I'm going to be focused on.
Yeah, and not just that, Conrad, but the country can't survive with a dual system of justice. And you know, these January 6 prisoners, there's about 80 of them that have been in prison since they were picked up not long after the riots on that day. And they were riots, and if people broke the law, they should be held accountable. I'm as for that for these folks as I was for the Black Lives Matter people that destroyed $2 billion worth of private property and got 30-something people killed and 800 and something people injured in that 6-month period that none of them are really being held accountable for. So I'm all for people being held accountable, but there's about 80 of these people that have been in prison pre-trial confinement for over 15 months now. One committed suicide when he found out, and he was in prison. He was going to be charged with parading and trespassing, and they were going to go for a 72-month sentence to try to put it under terrorism thing. I mean, this is crazy what's happening here, and we've got to get to the bottom of it and stop that stuff, because that's a violation of due process right there.
I agree with you 100%.
And we've got to get to the bottom of how this happened and fix those issues that aren't being looked at, because they're not being looked at.
So every one of your viewers need to look at the people that they're voting for. Take 5 minutes to do the research, to see how they voted on some of these critical issues, and to see if they're really and truly speaking for you. If they're not, vote against them. And the primary is the time to do it. I don't know when your primaries are, but all your viewers, look at your primaries and get involved. That's the time to really make a change. Otherwise, all you're going to have is the Democrat versus the Republican. And I tell people, or ask the question, how is it that Congress has a 17% approval rating but a 98% reelection rate? The reason is because people don't get involved in primaries, and then at the end of the year, they're faced with just a Democrat and a Republican. And if the Republican, they're going to vote Republican because who else are they going to vote for? And that's the problem. So get involved in your primaries. Find somebody that you like. Find somebody that really is doing and saying the things that you believe need to be done, and get behind them 100%.
Absolutely right. We talked about the establishment party leaders and the economy and everything. What about the pandemic and these emergency health powers and those kinds of things, Conrad? What are your ideas on how we all know that's got to change? We all know it's got to change.
This is the reason I was against this national vaccine database, Rob. The way that thing's written, I don't know if it was House Resolution 550. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read that or not. But it's HR 550. It was passed on 30 November of last year. And I would encourage all your viewers to read it. Just read it and see what it says. And basically what it does, it takes $400 million, almost $500 million program. And what they do is they use that money to basically bribe counties and states to follow what they want them to do, in order that there's reporting from the county to the state to the CDC on everybody's vaccination status, whether and maybe booster. And that what most people don't realize is how they passed that bill. There is a bill where they can they restrict, or they basically eliminate all discussion on the bill. Okay, and they do that for things like post offices. Like if somebody wants to rename a post office in your area. It doesn't cost a lot of money, a couple $1,000. And so they suspension is the word I was looking for. They suspend all the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this bill was $400 million, right? And they used the suspension rule on it so that they could get it through quickly, and they passed it. And 80 Republicans voted for that. And really, if you read the bill, it's very clear. It says real-time reporting. What does that mean? That means that when you get a booster shot, real time, within seconds, the CDC is going to know that. And at some point, they could use that to say, well, guess what? You can't get on this plane. You're not vaccinated. You're not boosted. Oh, you can't cross this state line because you see where it comes into? This could be a problem. And even Ben Carson said, governments are designed to grow and take over. It's kind of like a lion. A lion's not a bad animal, but guess what? It wants to kill all the deer and elk it can get a hold of. Well, you can't blame it for, so you got to restrict it. You got to keep things in line so it's not able to do that. And that's what this bill represented. And I agree with Ben Carson. This was a bad bill. Should have never been passed out of the House, and it was. And the guy I'm running against, French Hill, voted for it.
Wow. Yeah. It's another step down the very slippery road to digital vaccine passports, which I'm completely opposed to. It's a destruction of our liberty, is what it is. Because
it's not the government's business whether I'm vaccinated. First off, these aren't vaccines, and you and I both know they were. Right. They're experimental. We know that, but they were forcing everybody to get them. I have a daughter that works for the government, and they were forcing her. This mandate that Biden put out. He put out two mandates back in, I think it was early September. One mandate was everybody in the executive branch, to include all military, all other folks working, had to have it by the 22nd of November, one of the shots. Yeah. The other one was any company with more than 100 employees were going to have to force their workforce to get the vaccine, and they were going to use the labor law, Department of Labor under OSHA, to be with OSHA to do that, to force them. Well, the Freedom Caucus came up with a bill written by Andy Biggs. He was the main co-sponsor. They had like 38 co-sponsors on it to say, no, that's null and void. That's illegal. You can't do that. You know what? Not one legislator from Arkansas signed on to that. Not one. Okay, that bothers me. They come back here and tell us they want to protect our rights and they don't believe in mandates, but right there they had an opportunity to at least show that they weren't going to support that. But they didn't. They failed to do that. And that's why I say I'm going to go to the Freedom Caucus. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be voting for those things because we have too much government overreach, federal government overreach. I'm a big supporter of the 10th Amendment. I think that the 10th Amendment is critical when it comes to states' rights. And I think the federal government is stomping all over that.
Well, that leads me to another question. That is, what are the top 3 government executive branch entities would you eliminate right off the top?
Oh, I don't know which ones I would eliminate. I think that it would take a little time for me to make sure. I know the ones I want to reduce significantly. Department of Education is right on the very top of my list. It didn't come into existence until it was under President Carter back in 79, I think, or 77. But I think that there's way too much overhead, way too much power. We need to reduce that, if not eliminate it. All of them, FBI, NSA, all the intel agencies, all of them need to be restructured, and we need to look at them to make sure they're doing the job that they were intended to do. Okay, they're not there to be the woke police. They're not there to make sure their employees follow their dictates, and that's what's happening right now. I know because I got one child who works for one of them, and the amount of money that we are spending, tax money, on training the management on transgenderism and equity and white privilege, and how do you know? It's nuts. We're spending government money on all these things when they're there to do one thing: let's protect our country. They're there to ensure that we have a freedom to be able to do the things that our Constitution allows us to do, and that is, have freedom and pursue happiness. And I think that all of those organizations need to be looked at and look at scaling down. I think we're way, way too big. So that's one of the things I want to do.
Oh, yeah. DHS would be on my target list. Okay. I never agreed with the Patriot Act in the first place.
Well, the Patriot Act.
And, you know, the DHS creation was a waste of time, money, and resources. And now you see the Ministry of Truth that they're establishing, and they're doing exactly what we were all worried about would happen.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem with government agencies. They're only as good as the people that are in them and administering the policies that they are supposed to uphold. Let me give you an example. I've always been a FISA court supporter. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, I think, is a unique and very useful tool in the fight against terrorism and people who are spies or espionage against our country. But it was misused. It was misused against Carter Page, not just a little bit, big time. And my question is, why isn't anybody being held accountable for that? If I had written a FISA request and had lied in it and had put things in there, omitted information in order to get my way from a political standpoint, I'd still be in Leavenworth today. And I don't understand why nobody's being held accountable. And even the three judges, now I know they're secret, but the three judges, I've heard nothing from them.
Nothing.
Why aren't they screaming that they were deceived by the FBI leadership? Why isn't Comey being prosecuted right now? These are the kind of things that I don't understand, but when I get up there, I'm going to find out. But it really does bother me.
Yeah, and that's something that's unfortunate. This a place where we're probably going to disagree. You know, the FISA court might have had a good use at some point or another, but now it just needs to be abandoned because this is not right. We can't do secret courts. That's how all this happened, is because it was classified, and we have a lawyer that lies in order to beef up his case to get a warrant.
Right.
And the judges let it go, and then the judges don't do anything after it's proven and the guy's convicted because he pleads guilty that they were lied to, and they still let it go. No, it's got to go. We got to come up with a different system.
Well, one thing I know for sure, that nobody should be voting to fund that system until the answers that I just asked are answered. Yeah. And the problem is I haven't seen that. And but, you know, being an intelligence officer and knowing a lot of people in the intelligence world, good people, I see, you know, no one wants to risk their career. This is what my thought used to be. Nobody would risk their career and their livelihood and their integrity and their honor. Yeah. Okay. And so I trusted the system because I felt like the repercussions were so great that no one would ever step over that line who was entrusted with that type of information. Well, now we found out that that's not true. There are people who are willing to cross the line, just like we saw in the Supreme Court here recently. There are people who are willing to cross the line for political ideology. That is a real problem. It's infiltrating our entire government system, and we have got to try to get a handle on that. Otherwise, it really is going to tear us apart.
Well, you know, it's even infiltrated military intelligence, and you know, I was an 06 level commander slot guy in Air Force airborne intelligence. So I've worked with all the alphabet agencies, and I know the rules of engagement as of 2009. And now just the example of the Afghanistan debacle shows you that the intel has been politicized somehow, because had they told the President of the United States, hey, this is what's going to happen, and you cannot convince me we didn't know what was going to happen, when you abandon Bagram Air Base and don't use it to evacuate all the Americans before you leave, that's a prime example of, I guarantee it, 100%, I know it was politicized, and we've got to fix that because it's even in our military intelligence now, and so it's infected decision making.
Well, even a second lieutenant right out of ROTC could have planned a better evacuation than what we saw. And we all know that. And I know there were better evacuation plans available because I've been there many, many times.
Yeah.
My first trip to Afghanistan was in January of 2002. So I'm very familiar with it, very familiar with the area, and everybody else is too. That was a debacle that should have never happened, and it's because of leadership. And again, we've got a lot of people in leadership, even in the military, that were all appointed under whom? Under Obama. And unfortunately, Trump couldn't get rid of all those people. I'm very supportive of President Trump and his policies, but the one thing I wish he could have done better was surround himself with better people who could have pointed out some of these evildoers that were actually working for him. People who really didn't have his best interest at heart or the country's best interest at heart. It's more of a political game, and unfortunately, that's what we've got to deal with when I get up there.
Well, personnel is policy, and President Trump's heard me say this many times, if he's ever heard me talk about it, that he listened to the wrong political people that he thought were on his side, and he needs to surround himself with advisors that will shoot straight with him and talk to him about people that really can do these jobs that don't have to be associated with the big military industrial complex or the health industrial complex or the intelligence industrial complex.
You're 100% right.
You know, it just doesn't have to be that way, because there are thousands of hard charging people that will help him. All he's got to do is listen to the right ones and not listen to the ones he's been listening to.
That's it. Well, I don't know if we got enough time, but I'd like to tell you, if I could, a little short story about President Trump.
Go ahead.
You got just a minute?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't really understand the man. You know, and I didn't know him real well, but when I was on the campaign trail, I went to a little store called it's just a little motorcycle place out in the middle of nowhere, and the owner came up to me and he asked about my politics, and we talked, and he said I could put a sign up, and it's a little place called the Outpost. It's just, like I say, way out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a destination site for motorcycles. But he said, you know what? Are you ever going to see President Trump? And I said, yeah, actually on May 3rd, I'm going to be down there to Mar-a-Lago, and I'm going to see President Trump. And he said, well, could you do me a favor? And I go, what? And he wrote down a name on a piece of paper, and he said, this is my grandson. He said, my grandson, his name is Christian. He said, Christian was in a really bad really bad car accident about 12 years ago. He was 10 years old at the time, and really, really bad accident where it took off part of his skull, and I mean, it was really, really bad. But right now he's mentally disabled a little bit, and he's at the age of about a 14-year-old, but just a super sweet guy. And he said, we're kind of raising him, but he loves President Trump. He said, if there's anything you could do to get a signature, maybe an autograph. I said, man, I have no idea when I meet President Trump how much time I'm going to have. But if I can, I will. But no promises. He goes, no, I understand. No problem. So immediately when I got out to the car, I know a couple people in the Trump orbit. I made a few phone calls. They called back to confirm about when the accident was, what date, what exactly happened. The accident that he was in, by the way, was he was in a car with his mother, and a drunk driver hit him head on. And he was the only one that was really, really torn up. In fact, he died twice, flatlined twice, but they brought him back. But anyway, so they called me, and that was the last I heard from them. And then a week later, a package arrived at that they called it the Outpost. A package arrived. It was a package, and it was a hat with Donald Trump's signature, a MAGA hat, for Christian, and a letter from him and Melania, talking about, hey, Christian, we know you've gone through some tough times, and we're with you. You're Arkansas strong. I mean, what a great story. He'll never get any credit for that. We try to, let a few newspapers know that, hey, we got a local boy that was recognized by the former president of the United States, and nobody picked it up. And I really feel bad about that. But the story is a good one because it shows the character of President Trump, and it showed something that I really felt good about. And I was glad to be a part of that. But I wanted to share that with your viewers.
That's a fantastic story, and 99.9% of the personal stories you hear about President Trump are like that.
Right.
He is what he is. I don't think I will ever agree with everything that any person in office or in a leadership position does, but the man's policies were right on the same policy platforms that I've run on, and they worked. More importantly, they worked.
They worked. They worked.
We're looking at $4.75 a gallon for gas and $5.55 a gallon for diesel today. When a little over a year ago they were less than half that. It's just sad, and hopefully we can get the right folks in office and get the ship turned around and stop this craziness that's happening, that's tearing us apart internally here in the United States of America. Well, Conrad, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Rob.
Your election is what date?
The 24th.
The 24th of May.
Yeah. Can I put in my website? My website is electconrad.com, electconrad.com. We can use all the help we can get. If you want to throw a few bucks our way, we really appreciate it because it pays for advertising. And we're trying to get our last flyer out. So, but any help will be appreciated.
Well, we appreciate you, appreciate your service, appreciate your family's service, and your willingness and ability to get this job done. And I think you can. It's a hard hill to climb going up against an incumbent, as you know.
Yeah.
But it's worth the fight. It is worth the fight. The country's worth the fight, and I'm convinced that some of us are going to get up that hill and be able to make the changes that need to be made. Well, thank you very much, Conrad, and have a great election day in a week. I look forward to seeing the results of it.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one. Take care,
Thank
brother.
you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, retired Army Colonel Conrad Reynolds, Arkansas District 2, going up against French Hill. January 6th committee supporter will be the first one to be defeated a week from today, next Tuesday. And folks, if you want to support him, get out there and support him. I'm going to be supporting him. The Political Action Committee that I chair, Gator Pack, Veterans Leadership Fund, is endorsing Conrad tomorrow morning, and we will be in support. So God bless you all. God bless America, and keep up the good fight.